Anyway, so we'll start by just going around and everybody just kind of say who you are. My name's Carrie Kearney. I am the executive director of 1000 Friends of Iowa, and I'm also a member of the Des Moines Citizen Task Force on Sustainability, and have been part of the task force since 2016. So I'll just go around. Matthew, I have you next on my screen.
Yeah, and I'm next to you on mine, so that's great, Carrie. This is Matthew Pierce, he, him, in downtown Des Moines.
I can't hear anything.
Nope.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Wow.
Steve. Been involved with a lot of things, mostly CCI, but I do have passion for our sustainability work as well.
All right, how about you, Tim? We'll go to you next.
Sure. Hey, everybody, I'm Tim Wagner. I am Ag Outreach Coordinator for the Isaac Walton League.
I'm trying my phone. Thank you, Laura.
And I live up in Decorah, and happy to be here and helping Steve a little bit on this soil health bill that he's going to talk about if he ever gets his system figured out here.
All right, Betty, how about you next?
Sure. I'm Betty Salmon. I'm from Urbandale. I've been involved, well, Linda Lemons and I and Pat Bodie, I'm not sure if she's going to be on here, but we're starting up a new group.
JN34. Your service does not allow calling to the number dialed.
We're starting up a new group in Urbandale called Urbandale Climate and Social Justice. And so it's about sustainability also. So I'm very curious about that. And I'm also on the board at Iowa CCI.
All right, great, thanks, Betty. Elvin, how about you next? You'll have to unmute.
I've been active in several organizations locally. Raccoon River Water Association was probably the big one, and I was a CCI member for a number of years. And I decided to kind of get back into it because of all of the changes that are going on now with the legislation. And so when I got the email about this meeting, I was really curious to find out what was actually happening up at the legislature.
But it says I'm the only one here. I'm not hearing anything over the phone.
Carrie, do you have his phone number that you could text him or something?
Yeah.
Let him know we can hear him. There's got to be something.
He knows that we can hear him.
Okay.
He's been trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
But Sheila, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, was Elvin done? I didn't know if you finished.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Sheila Canoplo Odole. I'm an attorney and sustainability consultant in Des Moines. And I live in Beaverdale, and I'm on the Des Moines Citizen Task Force on sustainability. And I also was a founding member of SILT, which I see Mary Ellen is on the call. So shout out to all of the SILT folk.
All right, thank you. Kent, how about you next? And you're muted, Kent.
Where'd he go? Oh.
All right, well, why don't we come back to Kent? Kim, why don't you go next?
Okay, so my name's Kim Hageman, pronouns she, her, hers, and I'm a member of CCI and a number of other organizations, and currently we're working on starting to get possibly Polk County to pass a similar resolution that Des Moines passed in January about 24/7. So
Right,
interested in hearing what's said today.
Cool. And Carolyn?
Hi, I'm Carolyn Hake Walker. Member of the task force since 4 months before the Paris Climate Agreement when we started the task force for Des Moines, and still very interested in what's going to be said today, because sometimes I feel like the legislation at the state level is zilch. But anyway, glad to be here.
All right, Rita, how about you next?
She's muted.
Rita, you gotta unmute yourself. Oh, we're not hearing you at all. Okay. All right. Rita Bresnan, who's active with the Indianola Sustainability Committee. Laura, I'm going to come back to you. Mary Ellen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Am I unmuted?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Mary Ellen
So
Miller.
I call the phone number that's provided for Zoom. I enter in the meeting ID number, did that twice, and it says that meeting ID number does not exist.
All right.
So I'm getting roadblocks at both ends. So if you can hear me, should I just continue and write in the chat box?
Yes, we can. We'll.
Okay.
Hang on, Mary Ellen. I'm going to actually.
Well, I apologize for the technical difficulties. Apparently it's on my end. I was on a Zoom call earlier. Everything worked fine. Tried it again this time. I just can't hear. But I guess I'll start by going over some of the things at the state level. And I do want to put a link up here for you to look at in the chat box. The Iowa Environmental Council has a legislative bill tracker. And I find this to be very helpful to track what is going on at the state level on the bills. So that link gets you to the bill tracker. And I think I saw Kristen Weaverling on the call earlier, and I really like this, Kristen. You guys do a great job with that. And so this is a very good way to kind of keep track of a lot of the bills that are at the legislature that are in our priority area. But one of the bills I wanted to talk about first, it's a bill that we have seen a number of times over the years, and it deals with the bottle bill. So the bottle bill, as you know, is a pretty popular program in Iowa. It started in the early 70s, and it has not been updated since then. There have been many attempts over the years. This is one of those policy areas that have been trying to fix it, but there just has been, the groups are so dug in that are on the opposite sides. There has never been a chance to get any kind of agreement. You have the grocers on one side, and you have the beer distributors and the beverage distributors on the other side. And what makes it especially contentious, I think, is the way it's set up, the unclaimed deposits. So Iowa has a rate of return of about 71 or 72%. That means, almost 30% of the beverages that are charged a deposit, those containers never get returned. And so where does that money go? Well, right now it goes to the distributors. It's a windfall for them. They like the idea of having people not return their container. They get to keep that nickel. And this makes it especially difficult to get anything done, even to update it, which it desperately needs to be updated to include more containers from our point of view. But there's a bill that seems to be moving in the legislature. It is Senate File 470. It used to be Senate File 368, but now it's Senate File 470, and it was introduced by Senator Rosenboom. You may have heard about this bill. It did pass out of the Natural Resources and Environment Committee along party line vote. And then what it does, it would allow retailers to opt out of accepting any empties if there's a redemption center within 20 miles of that store. So that's a big problem right there, because the redemption centers, because they only get a penny and that has not increased, we've seen the redemption centers really dwindle to, there are not that many redemption centers around the state. So right there's a problem. And if there is a redemption center, you'd have to travel 20 miles to redeem your containers. And it would cut out the beverage distributors. Remember, they're the ones that get that windfall of the unclaimed handling fees and the deposits. So that cuts them out completely. So what would happen, the Alcohol Beverages Division, the ABD, would take over that role. And the redemption centers would have to haul the containers from where they are picked up to where they could be recycled. And if that, by doing that, they would get to keep whatever they could get for the scrap of aluminum. And that's how they would get paid. I'm not sure how that would exactly work, because it, increases, which is really kind of unusual. That means it would increase the size of government, which is something the Republicans never want to do. But under this bill, that would happen with the ABD. So this bill appears to be, it could be moving, but it's setting up the same old fight as we've always had. So I really don't expect that bill to pass, but it's just another attempt to try to fix the problem. There is another bill in the House that Bobby Kaufman has, and this just deals with it would allow the grocers to opt out of taking in any cans or containers, and right now it's they can opt out if there's a 10-minute drive to a redemption center, but this would expand it to 15 miles. So it doesn't change any of the other component pieces. The distributors would still be involved, but it would just allow grocery stores, and primarily, this is all being driven by the Grocers Association, just allow them to opt out. And I don't see that bill really moving. So the bottle bill, and another attempts this year, and I just don't see anything happening, but they keep trying. One of the other bills that did move today, and Tim Wagner that's on this call helped, has been a ally in getting this moving, and this is the House File 646. It integrates water quality and soil health measures into soil and water conservation districts. So the SWCDs, which for about 80 years, we've had them in Iowa, and they're really focused only on erosion and soil conservation. That's their primary function. And that really, SWCDs need to be updated and modernized. Well, this is really kind of a groundbreaking legislation, because it introduces water quality and soil health as to one of the measures that SWCDs can now be working on. Nothing prohibits them from doing it now, but because of our water quality problem is so widespread across Iowa, this is a situation where we need all hands on deck. We have the nutrient reduction strategy. We have some third-party folks out there doing things with water quality, the Iowa Soybean Association, the Iowa Soil Health Alliance. So there are some third parties that are trying to address this issue, but it's not enough. We know it's not enough. So SWCDs will be a big help. because there are 500 commissioners around the state, and they are volunteers. And while they're elected, they're still volunteers. And this is boots on the ground that could really get some things done. So this bill will go into chapter 161, which deals with the soil and water conservation districts, and it inserts water quality protections and soil health measures into existing code language. So it isn't creating something new or a new office, but it's giving a new direction for the SWCDs, where they can not only work on soil conservation, but now work on water quality and soil health. So this bill, like I say, Tim Wagner with the Isaac Walton League, myself, and John Norris, who represents the Union of Concerned Scientists, have been meeting with a bipartisan group of legislators since last August, talking about soil health and what soil health policy could look like here in Iowa. Of course, we would, if we were writing the bill and we had the votes to pass what we wanted, it would look differently. It would be more robust than it is, but it is at least introducing water quality and soil health into SWCD. So we're pleased with this bill that it's passed out of the Ag Committee in the House today. And it was unanimous. It's a very popular bipartisan bill. We expect it to pass out of the House, but we have some concerns in the Senate. So we're going to really be pushing on doing a grassroots effort and trying to get ag organizations and groups in Iowa to get behind this bill. So it's by far not a done deal. It's got a long way to go, but we think that this is really the best chance that we've had. We tried to get something going last year, and due to the pandemic, that kind of really put everything on hold. And so that's why we went to the route of working with Senator Tom Shipley in the Senate and Representative Norland Mumson in the House. And those two legislators were really behind getting members of both parties together to start talking about this issue. So we feel pretty good where we're at this point, but stay tuned, there's more to come. Another bill that we're watching and working on is the Iowa Solar ITC. So this is the income tax credit for people, residents, businesses, and farms that put solar energy on their property. And this has been a very popular program since it was introduced back about 2012. So the ITC, for every dollar that the state spends on incentive, gets a $7 rate of return. So since 2012, there's been $36 million that the state has put out as an income tax credit, but that has generated over $291 million of economic activity. So this is really has helped the solar industry to grow in this state, and we have room to grow. In fact, the solar ITC is so popular, it's oversubscribed. The tax credit is oversubscribed every year. And so there's a backlog of people that are waiting to get the tax credit. So what the bill, House File 221 does, it would pay down the current wait list, be a one-time payment to pay that down. It would increase the cap from $5 million a year to $10 million a year, and it would decouple our tax credit from the federal tax credit. That was really one of the main reasons we were able to get it passed back when we did, was that we coupled it with the federal tax credit. So it piggybacked onto the federal tax credit. So by decoupling then, because the federal tax credit lately in the last several years has been kind of on again, off again, on again, off again. And so we want to decouple and make it something that would be more, add more certainty to the tax credit, but we aren't going to have it go on forever. It will eventually wind down. But this bill because of our solar coalition is unique in Iowa, we have several agriculture groups along with the environmental groups that are have worked together on solar issues. And so the bill was introduced by Representative Jared Klein, who is a pork producer. He's a big solar advocate. He introduced this bill. It's in Ways and Means Committee. It got out of subcommittee. It's into the full committee. But because it's in Ways and Means Committee, that means it's funnel proof. It doesn't have to meet the internal restrictions on when bills have to pass out of one chamber over to the other chamber or out of one committee to stay alive. So it's called funnel proof. The Iowa Solar Trade Association was in to talk to Speaker Grassley at the end of last week. And Representative Grassley said that they're waiting for two things. One is for the March REC to meet, and the REC is the Revenue Estimating Council. The Revenue Estimating Council will determine, they'll take kind of a forecast look. What do they anticipate revenues will be for the state in the next fiscal year? The legislature then will use that number and get that big number and then back down to all the budget subcommittees on how much they're able to appropriate and spend. So that's what he said first. We're waiting for the REC to meet and tell us what the big number is. And the second thing, and depending on what that number that the REC comes up with, that might trigger income tax cuts. The last tax bill that went through the legislature that was supported by all the Republicans and signed by Reynolds had triggers in. So when revenues meet, have reached this threshold of a trigger, that would automatically create income tax cuts. So we have to deal with that now. If that, that revenue estimating number, if that triggers tax cuts, that means there may not be money for a bill that the solar income tax credit bill. So we're waiting to see what happens there. The last state issue that I wanted to bring up, it's known as the gas ban. You probably have heard about this bill, House File 555 and Senate File 455. There have been some cities in the country that have passed ordinances that on new construction homes, they can only be electric and not be gas for heating. Since these cities have passed a ban on natural gas, the Americans for Prosperity and some of the conservative groups around the country are proposing legislation that would ban cities from banning gas. So we all know that coal is the fossil fuel that is winding down because it is so expensive and it is fossil fuel that is very polluting. But natural gas is still a fossil fuel. It's about half the carbon intensity as coal. But wind and solar are minuscule compared to natural gas and coal. So natural gas is not, it's cleaner than coal, but we have resources that are much cleaner than natural gas. And if we want to get to net zero by 2050, we have to take some aggressive measures. And that's why some cities have passed a ban on new construction for natural gas. But we don't think that this is a good fit for Iowa because the Texas tragedy, the methane gas companies down there called it, they hit the jackpot. And Iowa lawmakers really should not create a special protection for a product that we don't even make here. With the wind energy, we have a supply chain. We make the turbines, the blades, the towers. We have a solar supply chain. So the dollars that we spend on renewable energy, many of those dollars stay here in Iowa, but we don't frack for natural gas and all of those dollars go out of state. So we don't think that's proper to create this special class for a energy resource that we have to use it or cannot ban it is not to say we have to use it, we can't ban it. So those are the state issues that I have for you this evening. And I will take a look at the chat. And while Laura does her presentation, I'd like to introduce Laura to give her presentation. Sorry, I can't hear you, Laura. I was looking forward to it.
Okay, it's all right. Most of what I'll be talking about, Steve already knows because he's following things so closely. Well, I really appreciated that in-depth look at some of the energy and environmental related bills because I've just been like drowning in all of the other legislation that is being considered. And if I could sum up one overarching theme of this legislative session, it's that there seem to be no guardrails on what the Republicans will propose. And a lot of bills have moved further this year. Bills that were introduced in the past that never got anywhere have moved further this year. So of course, the voting bill, the election bill, which I call the voter suppression bill, that has been a big thing that's been occupying a lot of my headspace. And I just checked before I logged on at about 5:20, I checked to see if the governor had signed it. And I did not see any indication that the governor has signed this bill. I do expect her to sign the bill, but that is going to make voting more difficult in many ways, especially early voting. So many of you might have already read about that. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I'm happy to answer any questions about the voting bill. There's a whole range of bills that I would put under the category of white grievance legislation. So this is bills that Republicans are upset about people talking about systemic racism or talking about things that don't center white perspectives. And so there's just a range of bills under the guise of freedom. They're actually pushing bills that suppress certain lines of inquiry. So workplace training that deals with systemic bias or implicit bias. There's a bill that they want to destroy that. The bill that would decrease K through 12 or university or community college funding if they teach any portion of the 1619 project that was produced by the New York Times and is now a curriculum at various age appropriate levels. There are many bills that attack LGBTQ rights, and these have been introduced in the past years, but this year, a number of them have gotten subcommittee hearings, which is unusual, and some have even advanced through subcommittees. So most of them target transgender Iowans, particularly trans youth, and it's very unfortunate. It's very disheartening for me to see, but that's that whole constellation of bills. And of course, we're seeing also a number of bills designed to placate the pro-gun or the Second Amendment part of the Republican Party base. So the Iowa House and Senate already approved the constitutional amendment that would add a very extreme version of Second Amendment language to our state constitution. That's something Iowans will vote on in November 2022 on whether to add that language to the Constitution. But not stopping there, there are also bills in the Iowa House and Senate that would remove any permitting requirements for concealed carry. Also, there's bills. I'm still waiting to see what they try to do, if anything, about abortion. The Iowa Supreme Court is about to hear a case related to the 2019 law that targeted sex education funding for Planned Parenthood. But I think that there might be some appetite in the Iowa legislature still to try to tack more provisions related to abortion, tack that onto legislation late in the session, which is something we've seen them do in the past. And the final thing, I want to leave lots of time for questions because I feel like this is a group where people are going to have a lot of questions, but I want to talk a little bit about redistricting because it's something that I've been concerned about for a number of years, really ever since the Republicans got the trifecta, because in most states that Republicans control, they have subsequently gerrymandered those states to entrench Republican control of the legislature. And Iowa has a very good nonpartisan redistricting process, but there's a little bit of a loophole in it that allows the legislature to reject 2 nonpartisan maps and then amend the 3rd map potentially to a gerrymander. Now, the good news from my perspective is that the US Census Bureau has really delayed the process of getting data to states. It's related to how difficult it was for them to collect the information during the pandemic. But instead of normally by now, the states would already be working with the population data from the US Census Bureau. It would already have arrived in February, but that data is probably not going to arrive until September. And that means that it really compresses the time frame that the legislature has to potentially consider a map. The Iowa Constitution requires new legislative maps to be approved by September 1st. And if they're not signed into law by September 15th, the Iowa Supreme Court takes over the redistricting process, at least for state legislative districts. That deadline doesn't really apply to congressional districts, but the Legislative Services Agency won't even have data to work with probably until sometime in September. And so it could be October or maybe very late September by the time we even have a proposed map. And the Iowa Supreme Court hasn't said how they're going to handle this situation. They could simply just direct the Legislative Services Agency to draw a map or multiple maps for them to choose from. They could delegate to the legislature. They could ask the legislature to consider the plans. I mean, the judicial branch just right now isn't commenting on how they plan to handle it. I feel that it slightly increases the chance that we will end up with a nonpartisan map because the Iowa House and Senate won't have time to go through that process of rejecting 2 maps and then amending the 3rd to a gerrymander. There just won't be time to do that before it gets to the point of the Iowa Supreme Court taking over redistricting. And the Iowa Supreme Court, although it's a conservative dominated court now, I don't think there's any appetite on the court to be seen as engineering a Republican gerrymander of the state of Iowa. I mean, that seems very far-fetched to me. So I'm hopeful that the Iowa Supreme Court will somehow make sure that there is some sort of nonpartisan map, but the details of that are still really fuzzy. So the legislative leaders have said they're looking at their options, but so far I haven't seen any bills introduced that toss out our current nonpartisan redistricting and replace it with something else. So that I would say is good news. But I don't know, Carrie, is there anything else that you wanted me to address before we go to questions? Or I know Steve was going to talk about some of the federal landscape as well.
Yeah, I think we're going to go to questions before we have him talk about the federal stuff. No, I think that's good. I think one of the things that we really wanted to do here is, since most of us on this call are involved in sustainability, and there's a number of members of the different sustainability committees on here, we view equity as a critical part of sustainability, and looking at how we incorporate equity into our communities is critical if we really truly want to have sustainable communities. So we thought it was important to talk about that stuff as well. But why don't we?
Oh, hang on. I actually forgot the group of bills that would make it harder for people to be on public assistance. Let me just briefly mention that.
Please do.
So in the Senate, Republicans in the state Senate have for a number of years tried to pass bills that would add work requirements and other hoops that people have to jump through to remain on food assistance or Medicaid or other forms of public assistance. These laws are modeled on laws in Arkansas and Kentucky, and they've had the impact in those states of knocking eligible people off the rolls, not because they did anything wrong, but just because they weren't able to jump through all the hoops. And so we have out-of-state groups lobbying primarily for these bills. And this year, the Senate is poised to move a lot of this kind of legislation. And the question is whether it will advance in the House. The last couple of years, the House didn't act on those bills, but now there's new leadership in the House Human Resources Committee, and we really don't know what's going to happen. In both the House and the Senate, there are bills that have cleared the funnel already that would reduce unemployment benefits. So they would introduce a 1-week delay in collecting unemployment for any reason. They would reduce, currently you can get more, higher unemployment benefits if you have more dependents, up to 4 dependents, but this would reduce that to 1. So people who had families with multiple children, they would see their benefits cut. It would also cut a program that gives 13 extra weeks of unemployment to people in communities where there was a plant closure. This mainly affects rural areas where there might be like one dominant employer. And if it goes out of business, it can be very difficult for people in that community to find other employment. That would also be on the chopping block. And those bills, they were proposed in 2019. None of them got to the point of being on the governor's desk, but it looks like this year there's a little bit more juice behind those bills. And it just seems kind of unbelievable that the legislature would be punching down on people when, when employment took such a huge hit last year. But that seems to be, that's something that I would really keep an eye on from an equity standpoint, because losing a week of unemployment benefits is a really big deal in itself, plus the ongoing loss for people who have dependents and people who live in communities where there just might not be a lot of jobs available. So, okay, I'll end there.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Laura. So Steve can hear us again.
Oh, good. Yay.
So that's good. So why don't we go ahead and open it up for questions? Matthew, I know you were kind of watching the chat. So do you want to?
Yeah, I was watching the chat, but I saw that Steve and Rayhan had answered some of the questions that were already there. About the materials in solar batteries. Myself, I always want to say this, I've always think it's a great idea to use like kinetic energy, like to pump water up and then like pull it down with gravity. That's a good way to store it without any chemicals. I had a question for Steve. Is there any chance that that the single provision of to get the 5 cents to the ABD instead of staying with the distributors, can that pass by itself? Do you think that would be anything?
Up, you're muted, Steve. Try unmuting on your computer too.
Yeah, I was.
Mute on the phone. Oh, we're so close.
Well, Steve, you actually need to go to your computer, click on your microphone and tell it that you're on the phone rather than on the computer audio.
Well, there's an echo.
Yeah, actually mute your phone, like the actual speaker or actual microphone.
Yeah, my phone isn't showing the mute button.
So if you go
Turn the volume down.
If you go on your computer and click on the microphone for Zoom, and if you go on there and tell it that you switch to the phone audio, then it'll stop that echo.
Well, I can't mute my phone.
Does it help if you turn down the volume?
Well, the only way it's going to stop the echo is if he clicks on the microphone on his computer and clicks on switch to phone audio and goes off the computer audio and just talks through the phone.
Does he need the phone? Can he just be on the computer?
Well, he can't hear us without the phone.
Oh.
Steve, you see the arrow next to the microphone?
All right.
We can't hear your phone right now either.
You're muted on the phone or on the computer or something. Sorry, Steve. Unmute the computer.
Okay, I've turned the volume down on the
Oh.
phone. Can you hear me?
That's
Mhm.
good. Yep.
Okay. I'll put my phone over here when I'm talking. So the question was, Matthew, can we have just the ABD option and not anything else part of the bill? I don't think that would work. There are too many connected component pieces. So if you disrupt one, it will impact something else.
Okay.
I saw a question in the chat about school vouchers. For now, a bill that would involve some kind of a voucher program has passed the Iowa Senate, but it's stalled in the Iowa House for now. There isn't enough support in the House Republican caucus, but I'm a little cautious. I wouldn't celebrate so early because we saw in 2019, in 2018, they didn't have the House votes for the big energy bill that Mid-American was pushing. They ended up getting it at the last minute. In 2019, they didn't have the votes for the judicial selection change bill. They ended up getting that at the last minute. So they have a way of twisting arms or buying people off or persuading people. So, but for now, the Iowa House is moving other pieces of the education bills that don't include the money that the provision about giving families money to spend on private school tuition or homeschooling. So that's the state of play right now. I saw Matthew ask who benefits when the social safety net bills are passed. I don't know, this out of state, this Opportunity Solutions Project, they're kind of similar to Americans for Prosperity. They just seem to derive some kind of psychic satisfaction from going around the country and lobbying Republican legislatures to pass things that kick people off public assistance. I mean, it's really hard to understand. And the Department of Human Resources doesn't even want this bill. They say it would cost them more money than what they already are planning to do to verify eligibility. So it's just it's hard to see any benefit at all. And some of the legislators who are pushing it are Republicans who represent districts where there's a lot of poverty. I mean, of course, there's a lot of poverty everywhere in any part of Iowa, but people don't realize a lot of times that in rural Iowa, there's just tremendous poverty in some counties. So anyway, it's hard for me to fathom really, but it's something that a few people are very fixated on, and nobody else in the Republican caucus really stands up to say, let's not do this. So at least on the Senate side. So we'll just have to hope, at least I'm hoping that on the House side, this thing doesn't come out of committee again. That was the story of the last 2 years.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions?
I see Mike Tramontina asked about affordable housing. I haven't heard anything lately. It seemed like there was possibly some support for some of the affordable housing. There were some tax credits, and I saw in one of the bills, I can't remember the bill number, maybe Steve remembers, but there was quite a broad spectrum of groups supporting the bill that included some of key business groups as well as housing advocates. So I always like to look at the lobbyist declarations because I feel like that tells you a lot. And whenever a lot of business groups are behind a bill, it makes me think that the Republicans might sit up and listen to that. So I'm not sure. I mean, those bills that relate to housing tax credits would not be subject to the funnel, so they wouldn't really be the focus right now of the work this week. But I think that it's possible that something might happen on that affordable housing piece. I don't know how hard the governor's staff are pushing for it behind the scenes. I don't really have a sense of that at all.
All right, thank you. Other questions?
No,
Just
I
not-
think that's it.
Go ahead, Matthew.
No, I think that was it. Laura covered the questions on the later half that I didn't get to. So yeah, I think we're good.
All right, anybody want to just unmute yourself and ask a question?
I have a question. So we've got all of these bad bills coming up. What is the pressure point that we can apply, and who do we apply it to?
I honestly do not know. I mean, I feel like they're, on the school voucher bill, I think that people were hearing a lot from their hometown superintendents and school boards, and I think that was helpful. Sorry. I don't really feel like a lot of the legislators are very receptive to public comments, though. I'm going to mute myself and try to take care of my dog, so maybe Steve has a better idea.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Sheila. And I wish I did have a better idea. I think we, talking to which, who you think which group would have the most impact, just as Laura was talking about with school boards. But we're starting to see where legislators, the Republicans in the House and the Senate, are acting more like their counterparts in Congress. I saw one of the questions talked about, do you know if the House and Senate are actually representing their constituents? No, they really have their ideology and think they're doing the right thing, and they keep getting reelected. So in their mind, that just reinforces these bad ideas. I don't know if you all know Senator Bill Dossler is a Democrat from Waterloo. He's pretty outspoken on things. He's made this statement about this session. He says the Republicans are drunk on power. And that's just how they've been behaving. And they have a chip on their shoulder, and they're arrogant with their thinking that their way is the only way. So this is a real problem that we have to, deal with. And there's just no one magic single thing that's going to change somebody's mind.
Yeah, I mean, the election bill was a good example of this, where the county auditors, which are mostly Republican county auditors, were just exclusively against it. The County Auditors Association was very against the bill. There wasn't a single county auditor. They couldn't find one county auditor to speak in favor of it. The lobbyists, I mean, the only people lobbying for the bill, there was the Trump campaign's lawyer, this Minuteman Defense Corps, basically like a right-wing militia type group, and then one other, an out-of-state, ideological conservative group. But there were no, I mean, within the state, there was just a massive broad coalition lobbying against this election change, and they didn't even get one Republican to vote against it. I mean, even the collective bargaining bill in 2017 had several House Republicans voted against that. But now, I mean, it's just really ideological in both of the caucuses. I guess there were 3 Senate Republicans who voted against the school voucher bill. But I mean, really, you see very little crossing party lines in either chamber. At least I haven't seen much of it.
So I want to go back to the ban on banning natural gas bill. And, my understanding is that bill is extremely broad and would have an impact on a lot more things than what we think it would, and potentially could even impact the new resolution that the city of Des Moines passed with the 100% carbon-free, 24/7 carbon-free energy. So I'm wondering, are there any pressure points that people can take action related to that bill in particular, that, where we think we might be able to stop it?
I have some talking points on this bill, and I should send them to you, Carrie, that you could distribute to the group, because there's some data here that Cedar Falls Utility just recently went through with the polar vortex we were in. And the spike for gas was over 100 times their normal price. And that was during the Texas outages. That has had a ripple effect around the country on the price of natural gas. So Cedar Falls Utility said this is going to impact customers $450 more over the next 10 months. Now, Mid-American has already said they are expecting minimal impact to the electric component of customer bills. So if you just do the math, that might speak that, having what happened in Texas is a casebook example of why there are problems with natural gas. It isn't just about the environment. It's about the people's pocketbook. And so I'll send you a copy of these talking points. And again, this was, I should give a shout out to Rashidi. This was put together by Carrie Johansson, and she has got some good math in this new document. I just saw it today. And it also has propane prices have jumped 44.5% in the 2 weeks between February 8th and February 22nd. So again, it comes down to dollars and cents and doing the math.
It also seems like this is a local control issue, and bringing that back up to supporters of the bill. There typically tend to be large proponents of local control, and this is one bill where they're taking the opposite tact, and this could be really impactful for especially communities that have municipal electric utilities, where it would prevent them from continuing to expand electrification for their customers, and limit their ability to grow their utilities and their customer base.
So if you look for any Republicans that had either served on a city council or were a mayor, they might be a little bit more sensitive to some of the broad implications of the bill. For example, new Senator Clemish is a former mayor. He took Senator Breitbach's spot, so that's up in Northeast Iowa. Because had been a mayor for a long time, I found him to be, he could be sensitive to home rule. So those are the kind of pressure points or the weak links in the chain you want to try to find, where if you could wedge them away. But the problem in the Senate is, even if you were successful in getting Clemish to vote against something, there's plenty of Republicans to get to 26.
All right, thank you. That's depressing. So it sounds like we have a lot of work to do related to this natural gas bill, and then also work to support the soil health bill and to support the solar tax credit bill. And then there's a lot of work to oppose things. And just as a question, are there any bills related to building codes, zoning, historic tax preservation tax credits, anything like that we need to worry about? I'm not.
There was a building code bill, but I don't think it was going to move. I'm just trying to look here.
Or the energy code.
Yeah, maybe that was it, the energy code. Senate File 216 it deals with the energy code. It's in the State Government Committee, and I doubt if it's going to move out of committee. So if it doesn't move out of committee by Friday, it's dead for this year.
Okay.
Unless it gets attached. I see somebody asked which of these bills are model bills created by ALEC. I don't know exactly. I mean, I know that the bills that are designed to kick people off public assistance, those are bills that are modeled. This Opportunity Solutions Project promotes similar bills in other states. I mean, I think that sometimes the bills that are the most dangerous are the sort of homegrown lobby groups like the Iowa Association of Business and Industry, and some other, the Farm Bureau, of course, is behind a lot of bad bills. And so I think sometimes, and the unemployment bill that would reduce unemployment benefits, that's something that Iowa Workforce Development, the state agency, has been promoting. And I mean, it's possible that portions of that are taken from model legislation in other states, but I think the bigger issue is that we just have these very powerful interests within Iowa that push for very bad legislation, that it goes beyond whatever ALEC and Americans for Prosperity are pushing.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. So we're going to shift. Oh, go ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah, I just wanted to circle back on the energy code bill. Like Steve mentioned, it probably doesn't have the legs to get out of committee. at this point, but it's a positive bill in the sense that it ties the state minimum code, energy code, to the most current edition of the energy code. So it's something positive to advocate for if you have an opportunity to do so.
All right, thank you, Jeremy. That's important. Potentially we can touch base that if we can get a brief talking points or something, that would be good.
I see in the chat, Miriam has a question about a CAFO moratorium. The House Speaker, Pat Grassley, has already ruled that out. I mean, their bills on the CAFO moratorium are introduced every year and they never even get a subcommittee hearing. So definitely not going to be any legislative action on that this year, and certainly not next year with Republicans still in control. So actually that would be a heavy lift even if Democrats control the legislature. So I'm not too optimistic, but in any case, the bills will continue to be introduced.
Yeah. Thank you, Laura. So we're going to shift gears just for a little bit and have Steve kind of talk to us a little bit about things that are happening at the federal level, that there may potentially be some brighter spots in that for us. So Steve, do you want to talk about that?
Yes, thanks, Carrie. And that's right. There's more going on at the federal level that's more exciting. And I'm doing more work at the federal level than I'm actually doing at the state level. So we know that the administration has the goal of net zero by 2050. That's pretty aggressive. That's going to mean a lot of aggressive policy. And under the climate investment strategy, there are right now between 50 to 60 bills that fall under this climate investment strategy. And this is all geared to get to the net zero by 2050. There's legislation that deals with clean electricity generation, grid modernization, transportation electrification, transit and smart growth, building decarbonization, manufacturing of clean technology, decarbonization of industrial processes, in agriculture, conservation, adaptation, technology development, international diplomacy, and research. Now that's kind of a list of things we just dream about. And here it looks like things are going to actually move in Washington, D.C. Now, of course, we have the Senate to deal with. But I think I know there's a lot of energy in the House to get things moving in this direction. And so I wanted to focus on just a couple of things that are kind of big picture that's exciting to learn about, that USDA and Secretary Vilsack, some of the priorities he has listed and things he wants to work on that relate to carbon, and that is carbon farming. Now, creating another revenue stream for agriculture that is sequestering carbon, that is helping things that we care about, I think is important. We need to get the science right. There's a lot of complexities when you talk about measuring how much carbon is actually sequestered with any type of a farming practice, or how much carbon is not emitted with a type of carbon process. For example, there are in Iowa 479 different soil types. It depends on the soil type to how much carbon is actually sequestered. So when I say we've got to get the science right, we've got to know that if we're going to pay a farmer to sequester carbon, we need to know how much carbon is that. It just can't be a default value, because then we may not be hitting our goals if we're just going to use a simple default. Well, we believe it's going to be this. That's what my model says. So if there are 479 different soil types, and I looked on, our family has a farm in Northeast Iowa, and I looked on an 80-acre plot, and there are about 8 different soil types. and it kind of followed the contours of the land or the slope of the land. It wasn't a checkerboard, but it was the 8 different soil types. So if I'm going to, have a somehow getting revenue for how many tons of carbon I'm sequestering per acre, I'm going to have to measure and be accurate. I mean, there's got to be verification, there's got to be certification, and that's where we see all kinds of these third-party groups stepping up to sign farmers up today to start getting paid for carbon sequestration. So it's kind of like the wild, wild west with some of these companies. How do you know that they're doing it the right way? Well, I think that's where the federal government comes in. USDA needs to set up a framework where companies can operate in and have, again, the modeling or the testing so you know that what you say you're doing, you're actually doing, or what you're planting, or whatever you're drawing carbon down, that is actually working. So carbon farming has great promise. It's exciting. It's something that I think, there's a lot of interest. There's a group that formed called the Food and Agriculture Climate Alliance, and they've come up with some really great recommendations. It's very impressive. And here's who's a membership of this alliance. It's the American Farm Bureau, it's the National Farmers Union, the Nature Conservancy, the Environmental Defense Fund, and a few other folks, but they formed this group, and it's FACA, and they have some, they're supporting the development and oversight of private sector markets for GHG credits. So they're private sector markets. Well, this is kind of like the wild, wild west of these companies. We need USDA to have structure and a framework for them to operate. Promoting public and private sector tools to incentivize farmers and ranchers and forest owners to prioritize and scale climate smart practices. So all this sounds great, but we really got to dive into, well, what is it? How is this actually going to look? But it's putting together some interesting coalitions. And there is an Iowa Agriculture Carbon Assessment Group up at Iowa State, led by Dr. Lisa Schulte-Moore. Senator Stabenow promises to push agriculture carbon plan with legislation. It was interesting during the hearing with Secretary Vilsack, she was kind of touting her bill. And I've been through her bill. Her bill has, is very good. His comment was, well, look, Senator, I don't need legislation to do this. I'm going to do this. So that's kind of Secretary Vilsack's frame of mind. He wants to push the envelope and do as much as he can do without legislation. But we'll see how far that, I'm sure Congress will want to have something to say about it. The other exciting kind of new, and it's not really new, but it's hydrogen. Now I'm learning that there are different hydrogens. It depends on the feedstock. So you have green hydrogen, and that feedstock is a renewable electricity source, such as miscanthus, switchgrass, biomass, a renewable source for that electricity. That's called green hydrogen. Blue hydrogen is created by using natural gas. And then there's gray and black hydrogen, and that's using more coal. Now that, I forgot to mention that blue hydrogen with natural gas, that has a component where it sequesters the carbon that is emitted. It is immediately captured and sequestered. That's what blue hydrogen is. So hydrogen has great promise, not only for transportation sector with a car with a hydrogen fuel cell. In California has a goal to get to over 1 million hydrogen cars on the road by 2030. So there's promise in the transportation sector and then also in the electric generating sector with hydrogen. And I think we have to get it right and we have to be aggressive. But I think we need to pay attention to technology. You know, we talk a lot about electric vehicles, and we are supporting electric vehicles and more infrastructure. But I read a Princeton study that said the 2020s will be about electric vehicles. But if we want to get to net zero, we have to have the 2030s is going to be about hydrogen. So today, hydrogen isn't economical. It works, but it's not economical. By 2030, the hope is it is economical and it can become more mainstream. And there are some advantages to a hydrogen vehicle. It takes about 5 minutes to fill up, so like gas in your car. You don't have to plug it in. And it's just emits a water vapor. And again, if it's green hydrogen is the fuel source, it can be the most efficient and lowest emitting vehicle for transportation. So that is what's kind of the big picture. Now, the couple of things I'm working on at the federal level, and I just want to spend a couple of minutes going over a couple of initiatives. And the first one is called DALSI 2.0. And DALSI is a program in USDA under the Landscape Conservation Initiatives. And DALSI stands for the Driftless Area Landscape Conservation Initiative. DALSI was a program that was only going for 5 years between 2013 and 2017. And then it went away. But it used EQIP dollars for the research. The goals and objectives was to manage working land to reduce erosion, manage woodlands for increased diversity, restore prairies and manage grasslands and oak savannas for habitat, and restore cold water streams. And this program was very effective. It was popular. The Trout Unlimited used resources from this program to restore trout streams in Northeast Iowa and in Southeast Wisconsin. So this program had some very popular, and it was focused just to the driftless area using EQIP dollars. So Driftless 2.0, we have drafted that we would like to change and tweak this to kind of fit what some of the priorities Secretary Vilsack has. So this has more about regenerative agriculture components to it. And the resource objectives would be to manage working lands for year-round ground cover, rebuild soil, sequester carbon, all of the things that Secretary Vilsack has kind of already listed as priorities. We wanted to have a resource objective that matched that. Also then to manage woodlands for increased biodiversity, improve the health of the woods to provide habitat and sequester carbon, restore prairies, manage grasslands while expanding habitat and sequestering carbon, restore cold water streams, reducing stream bank erosion and threats of flooding while improving trout habitat. And then one to build for the future and enhance the entire farm ecosystem by establishing grassroots partnerships to educate landowners and operators on the benefits of regenerative agriculture, soil health, and holistic grazing. So part of regenerative agriculture is reintroducing livestock on the landscape, not to the size and scope of what confinement animal feeding operations are, but to the small herds. And this is really what will fit the landscape in the driftless area. And there's a lot of promise with regenerative agriculture, and it's more biodiversity, and it fits into the type of ecosystem we want to protect. So we are proposing driftless or Dulce 2.0. We're talking to groups in the 4 states that make up the driftless region. And we've already got an agreement with Congresswoman Bustos that she will lead an effort if we need to go through the congressional route. But since this was just a landscape conservation initiative inside of USDA, and it was created by USDA, Dulce 1, we're going to first make an attempt through USDA to just let's recreate a program for the driftless area, fund it with EQIP dollars, and let them do it the way they did it the first time. If that doesn't work, we have a congressional route that we're going to try to go with. The second initiative that we're going to push for is our energy districts. And I know you all are familiar with what an energy district is. And so the Department of Energy has the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. And they already administer about a dozen initiatives. And there are, and we think that energy districts could fit neatly as an initiative within the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. So we have one of our partners is up in Michigan, and they are interested in the energy district model. They're in Traverse City. They are a nonprofit, and they are already doing work with housing, but they see a fit that the energy district model. So we're going to partner with them as to a way to get to DOE, because the new Secretary of DOE, of course, is Jennifer Granholm, former governor of Michigan. So this is the route. This is also similar to Dulce. This could be just created within DOE. But if that doesn't work, we're going to seek a congressional route to try to get something at the federal level that could help with energy districts and start a pilot program. And we already have pilots around Iowa, and we're trying to get something started in Illinois and Wisconsin and Michigan. And this might be a way to expand and fund these models, especially in rural areas. So that's my report for the federal component of the program, Carrie.
All right, thank you so much, Steve. So do we have any questions either about this federal piece or any other questions about the state work that was talked about earlier? I saw a few things came up in the chat. Matthew, you want to go through any questions in the chat?
Steve, that was so informative. Thank you very much.
Well, that's where the good news lies. Kind of unusual. I'm not used to that.
On so many levels. Yeah, Sheila was asking about the woodlands tax bill. I had forgotten about that. Laura had said something about that.
Well, it got through a Senate committee, so it's through the funnel. This is the bill that would, right now there's a forest, what's it called? The forest tax exemption for
Forest Reserve.
Forest Reserve program for privately owned woodlands. And this one would reduce the eligibility. So first of all, you'd have to have 10 acres to qualify for it at all. I believe that was what it's had in the draft. Currently, I think just with 2 acres, you can qualify. And then there were other things where you wouldn't get 100% of the tax credit, but I haven't heard anything. I don't think it was brought to the Senate floor yet. Do you know, Steve? I think it just was through a committee, so.
Well, yeah, if it's a tax credit, it would be funnel proof. They probably were trying to get to the other bills before. I kind of had the impression that it sounded like this bill has legs.
I haven't heard how much support it may have in the House.
Yeah, I have not heard the House. I think that was just in the Senate.
It's a Ken Rosenboom special. He seems to be the person spearheading it. And I don't know whether it's an idea that he had or whether it's an idea somebody put in his head.
Other questions?
There was a little bit of comments about electric vehicles and why Iowa taxes them disproportionately. I know that was a bill that John Forbes voted on. John Forbes is the representative from Urbandale, Democrat. He has solar panels on his pharmacy, but voted to tax himself with a electric vehicle. So
That was a 2019 bill. I can't,
Yeah.
I remember I wrote about it. It went into effect in that,
Yeah.
that charged higher fees for electric vehicle owners.
Yeah.
I haven't
Yeah.
heard about anything
The
happening.
most, the piece that we were really concerned about, of course, the increased on the registration fee, but it was putting a sales tax on electric fuel. Just the way there's well, I should say it's was, on gasoline, we don't have a sales
A road
tax.
use tax.
No, I'm losing the name for the tax, but it was similar to gasoline fuel. Since there's a tax per gallon, they wanted to put a tax per kilowatt hour. And no other state has policy where they tax per kilowatt hour onto charging. And even, for people that, businesses that want to put charging station on their property to attract, customers that have EVs, now they would have to start collecting a sales tax. And even Craig Paulson is the director of the Department of Revenue. And he came over and said, hey, look, we've got to set up all of this, a whole new sales tax on something we currently don't tax. I don't have the manpower to do this. I can't make this. So what they did, they pushed the date back for that piece to come into law for about 3 years or 4 years. But that still will put a chilling impact on electric infrastructure if we have to now start calculating. And it's not a large tax. It's not going to impact the road use tax fund hardly at all. But the road builders thought, well, there's a tax per gallon. There should be a tax per kilowatt hour. And that idea won the day. We'd love to see that piece repealed.
So it takes effect, the excise tax on electricity takes effect in July 2023, I think.
Yeah.
The registration.
Excise tax. That's what I was trying to think of. There's an excise tax on
I
gasoline.
just went and looked it up because I remembered that I wrote about this in 2019, but I haven't thought about it in a long time. So, well, it sounds like there's additional registration fees for electric vehicles that go into effect in January 2022. And then the
Right.
excise tax on electricity would take effect in July 2023. Yeah.
Other questions? If people have questions, you can just unmute yourself and jump in. Anything? All right. Well, I want to thank Laura and Steve very much for coming and presenting for us tonight, giving us an update on what's happening. And I want to thank all of you for joining us. We've got a really good turnout. I appreciate it very much. And if there's not anything else, then we will go ahead and does anybody have any announcements of any upcoming events or things that they want people to know about?
I just want to say that I posted a couple of links in the chat. One of them is to our auditor, Rob Sands' report about how much money has been saved in the communities that have done solar projects, which I thought was, a nice positive piece of news. And the other one is a report from ProPublica that shows climate migration over the coming decades and what parts of the country remain livable. And of course, Iowa, we are sitting in a pretty sweet spot. So we've got to really think about everyone else that's going to be coming here wanting to survive this. So anyway, those were two things I thought people might find interesting to take a look at. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Anything else? All
I
right.
see Mary Ellen Miller mentioned in the chat that this forest reserve bill comes up every year, but there's a coalition of woodland owners and tree groups that have successfully beat it back in the past. So she said she's hopeful it won't go anywhere this year. So that's good to know. I wasn't aware that this was an idea that had been introduced before.
Yeah, thank you.
I would like to add something. I've been listening tonight, and it's the first time I've ever engaged in or seen a group like this, and I follow politics locally a little bit, now more so now that I'm retired, but I would welcome, I would welcome a chance to join in any public display about that would support efforts to stop some of the recessive, well, the poor proposals going on by Republicans right now. If you needed a demonstration, I would join. So
Right.
if
Thank
I would
you.
be one person, would be glad to join in and get others to join as well.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Carolyn?
Yeah.
With all the negative about the state, I wanted to point out that about an hour or two ago, I heard at the local level, the budget for fiscal year 22 for Des Moines, they have increased the amount of money they're going to give to the urban forest master plan. There was a big worry that there would be very little given to the master plan, which would have called for an increase in the canopy of trees in Des Moines. Right now, Des Moines plants anywhere from 400 to 700 trees a year. With the master plan, David Yan, our forester, asked that it go up to 3,800. Due to COVID, that wasn't possible this year, but with some advocacy on the part of some council members and task force members, we got some extra funds, and we're going to increase it to 1,800 trees this year and hopefully more next year. So I just wanted to say we just can't give up on when we see all of this Republican mess that we're in, that local action, federal action, we can make things happen.
Yeah, thank you, Carolyn. And thanks for all your work on that and
That's
others on the Des Moines Task Force, because it really was a lot of the advocacy over this past year and before that as well that made that happen. Way to go. That's exciting.
That is exciting, yeah.
Anything else?
Miriam has her hand up.
Oh, yep. Go ahead, Miriam. I can't see everybody, so.
Well, hi, this has been very well done and very interesting, and I appreciate having been here. I realize and heard tonight again that moratorium is pretty much dead on arrival for the CAFOs. However, I do want to say that CCI, Food and Water Watch, the Grannies, and many other groups are on the ground doing work, trying to educate the public and set the stage for when it'll be possible to do this. When we talk about Iowa's cesspool water, a lot of that is manure and a lot of it's from CAFOs and a lot of other problems. So I just want to reassure you that it may be dead in Des Moines, but it's growing elsewhere.
All right. Thank you. All right. Anything else? All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you again, Laura and Steve, for doing the presentation.
Thank you for the presentation.
Thanks for
We recorded this and we'll send that out along with the links from the chat for folks. So thank you very much. And we'll talk to you all soon.
Okay.
Sounds good. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye.